Hey everybody, Shaman.
Julie Dumois-Sands at Harper Therapy.
Man, that's an awesome. You just went through the. Yeah, we're from Harper Therapy, and we were talking last week about boundaries, kind of the concept of how being in that healthy space with healthy boundaries creates an okayness or a safety to be more vulnerable and more relational. And what are we talking about today?
So in the introduction to this month, one of the things we talked about are the 4 different kinds of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of boundary that we're going to talk about today is the external boundary, which is when most people think of boundaries, what they think of, right? That the me and the you.
Right.
And yeah. So an external boundary is the first kind of boundary that we're going to talk about. And it really is the ability to let others know what is and is not okay with us.
Right.
But what we think of when we set boundaries sometimes is we think of that it's going to change the other person's behavior.
Yeah, I guess it's true. We set boundaries thinking about controlling other people, really.
Yeah.
Right.
And this boundary, or the way that we work with them here, kind of turns that on its head.
Right.
So an external boundary is what I will or will not allow in or in my space. But it isn't me trying to control someone. It's me taking responsibility for myself.
Well, I think Yolanda always calls it like staying in your lane. Like you have your side of the road to control, and particularly in relationships. And that's all we can really control. Like we can't manipulate others. I mean, we can try, but it usually doesn't come off very well or very relational, right? But you can't control others to get them to do what you want to do and that kind of thing. You can only control your side of the lane. And that's how we need to look at boundaries. Is this is all me.
Yeah.
Right?
So an external boundary is what I will do in response to someone else's behavior.
Right. Like I can't be around this thing. This is not acceptable to me, so I'm going to remove myself from it, or not allow it in my space. Or I think in the blog you had mentioned something about like social media, like
that's a big one right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if I remember right, you were talking. That was this blog, right?
Yeah.
Like this week's blog, but about like maybe not allowing comments, or not taking that in, right? Like.
Yeah, one of the examples was if I post something on my social media account and I don't like the way people are responding, I can choose to close comments down.
Right.
I can't control what this person comments or the interaction that these people have, but I can say this isn't going to happen on my page.
Right.
Close comments.
Right. And I think a lot of us should be maybe a little braver to think about that, rather than just get into all these social media fights. It kind of is ridiculous when people are just trolling each other. But
yeah, so that's an external boundary that one could choose to set. I'm not allowing this into my space.
I think I have one of my children. He's just like anti-social media, right? Like he's like, nope, don't need it, don't want it, don't need that negativity in my life. And I have always admired that boundary that he has. Just the idea that I don't need it. And on one end you're like, oh, but you're missing all of these things. But he doesn't see that at all. It's just, for him, it's an appropriate boundary.
And it's a courageous boundary for someone your children's age.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, early 20s, mid 20s. That's, I think that is counterculture.
Very much.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see some kids kind of do that, right? Because this is a group of children now, children in their 20s, they're not children anymore, young adults now, that have been saturated with it. So, like, it's really interesting to see on occasion when one of them stands up and says, no, I just don't want to be part of this. And what a cool, courageous boundary to step into. And I don't know. I mean, what if we put this in more areas of our lives, right?
Yeah, just choosing not to engage in things that are potentially negative. It's almost like having a diet of cotton candy, right? Like social media.
Okay, say more.
Well, social media can just be cotton candy. It doesn't have anything that really nourishes us.
Right. And you just keep shoving it in.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's an interesting analogy.
Yeah. But I like how you brought that into boundaries, because that's, again, like we think of boundaries we don't think of boundaries in that way, but that's a very healthy boundary to set, is I choose not to let this in.
Yeah. And not a normal one, right? Like we don't, I'm trying to think of other examples of like really good boundaries, particularly in like our society.
Well, I have a friend at work, and she doesn't allow her 2-year-old daughter to watch children's programming because she feels like the images appear too fast. There's too many colors, and that's a boundary that they've set in their family. She can watch the old Winnie the Pooh and Sesame Street.
That's funny.
Because there are less pictures or less frames of pictures per minute.
Okay.
And it's a different way that children's brains are wired when they're exposed to so much.
Yeah, I think you could go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Like, because I was thinking, you know, like the short form video, like TikTok and, you know, Reels and all that. And it's like how much that adjusts the way you see the world and your attention span and stuff. And that would be a great boundary to put in place, right? But like, that's just me judging social media.
Well, I think there's science behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. But the important aspect here is like, boundaries are appropriate, and you're allowed to have boundaries. And as long as your boundaries aren't about trying to control other people, right? Am I missing something here?
No.
Then you're at least kind of staying in that center of health. You're not completely boundaryless where the world's just
acting on
you, and you're not completely walled off where you're not interacting with the world at all, but like that middle ground, that sweet spot where you're relational and you're safe, and you're also, I think we'll talk a little bit about this one maybe next video, but like protecting others from yourself as well, right? Like, I don't know, is there anything else we need to talk about?
I think that's good.
All right, guys, thanks. Oh, and if you can use some help with some of this, Harper Therapy, 813-434-3639. I almost forgot to give our number.